G'day everyone, welcome to the seasonal update brought to you by the TAS Farm Innovation Hub and AgLogic for March. Today we're going to talk about irrigating potatoes, particularly late season irrigation. This is in terms of weather conditions that can have some of the greatest impact at this time of year. It's around that harvestability of potatoes, particularly those potatoes where we're coming into the late part of the season when water use slows down, and how we can use probe data or ETO data to understand how we can transition out of that irrigation in the late season potatoes. And also, as usual, be going around our statewide seasonal outlook, looking at the dryland moisture probes, which are part of the AgLogic Weather Station network, or farming forecasted sites, which were installed by NRM 4 years ago. This is the kind of year when, if you've got spuds in the ground, that you look at this kind of weather system and it gets you nervous, or you look at the radar and you see that coming along. Things like this, and not so much on this one, but just when I was looking at screenshots on my phone, I just realized I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to radars, and I like to screenshot rainfall systems a lot. So it's sad, but anyway. And the other one we see when we come up, when whatever weather data we look at, are these kind of this kind of information that we see coming in the next week or two. Now, they can make us nervous when we've got spuds still sitting in the ground. And while it give you a number there, it might be a range, and especially when the range says between 5 and 30 or something like that, it can make us all very nervous. So when we look seasonally, going back in time, we can see here, I've picked out a few, just use Devonport as a location, picked out a few monthly rainfall data that's linked to, so this light line here is the mean rainfall for Devonport, and seeing here years where these large rainfall events can happen in March and April, and February, March and April, particularly March and April. We can see that these are years, and this is rainfall that we can see that have big impacts when it comes to harvestability of potatoes. So that you can see that in 2022. I've gone back 2021, that late Feb, we had some rain there that had an impact. Devonport Airport again, in 2020, we've got those wet months there that had a big impact on the harvestability of potatoes. And then same thing, 2018, that February, March, March has rainfall there, which caused a bit of havoc. So when we talk about potatoes, and this is a conversation I have quite often when it comes to potato growers, we're all aiming for that 80-ton wheat crop, that potato crop. So what are we aiming for? We go, yeah, we want to get that 80 tons. That's all our plan. So we all have a plan. And I've quoted him in the past, but you talk about Mike Tyson saying we all have a plan until we get punched in the face. And that punch in the face is the rainfall that we get in that March, April period, when we've got a beautiful looking crop. We've got 80 tons there sitting in the ground. We've done everything right. The plant's as happy as it could be. They've really put a lot. We've got great tuber initiation. We got a lot of tuber bulking, which is everything right. But then we get punched in the face and we get that rain that either we sit wet, it leads to disease, or we just can't get it out of the ground. So what are we aiming for? Yes, we're aiming for high tons, but at the end of the day, we are aiming for the check in the mail at the end of the day. That's what we want. Now, if your potatoes are in the paddock, in a wet paddock, you're not getting the check, because either you've got the yield, but you don't have the quality, or you aren't able to harvest them. So, like I said, that's where yield potential is 80 tons. That's all we're going to aim for. Okay, but we got to start to balance risk. All right. Yes, we can aim for 80 tons, but should we just be a bit more strategic in how we irrigate, particularly later in the season, to make sure we balance our risk out, so we've got high yield, but then we don't have rotten tubers and storability issues. And it can be one poorly timed irrigation could be all the difference. I'm going to go into a little bit of this. It could be poorly timed early season, or it could be poorly timed late season. So there's a couple of mechanisms there that we want to talk about. And these are the kind of things that, while we're talking about potatoes, and some of you may not have, maybe either might not grow potatoes, or you might have already harvested them, some of you also happy days. These are some of the aspects that we look at in terms of understanding our soils and how we irrigate, so that you can apply these across the board. So making sure that we get it right, we get our irrigations right, so we're not ended up with these kind of scenarios when it comes to irrigation. Now, when it comes to understanding irrigation requirements, matching ETI, I've talked about this many times, and it's something that we really want to make sure that we get right. So understanding that as your crop increases, your crop water demand, so your evapotranspiration, so your mixture of evaporation, so what you lose, water going into the atmosphere from sun, wind, things like that, and then the culmination of the water that your plants use, so it's evapotranspiration. So we've got some people at the moment who have planted crops who are sitting in that phase. But and then now we've got potatoes which are coming into this phase. We've gone past that maximum evapotranspiration, so maximum water demand, and we're starting to tail off the other end. So if you look at potatoes, that's the curve that we're kind of looking at. So we're looking at not just an ETO, so peak water demand. We've got an ETO that we get off our weather apps, or we've got off the weather station. So you got an ETO, let's just say, in this time of year at about 6 mils a day. Well, you got to multiply that by 1.25. So then that gives you 6 mils plus, an extra mil and a half to make sure that you're keeping up with the demand. So that's a crop water demand, an ETO curve for potatoes, and all crops will have this to some degree. So this is one I want to jump into data, and what I've got here is 3 scenarios from paddocks that I've gone back and had a look at from last year, and showing you how irrigation scheduling how we look at irrigation scheduling to make sure that we're not only we're balancing that yield, but also that risk mitigation for the end of the season. So this here is essentially someone who's aiming for a higher yield target. Now, if this was an early season crop where we're not too worried about, or beautifully free draining soil early season crop, that we're not too worried about these rainfalls that can come through March and April, no worries, go your hardest. This is a great strategy to go with. So you can see here we want to maintain good soil moisture in that topsoil, get good tuber initiation, and then we want to get nice consistent irrigation where we're not drawing moisture up past that 40 centimetres. Majority of our irrigations at 40 centimetres, and that's looking at tuber bulking, but then we want to look to dry off here. Now, if I look at this in retrospect, we look at this information, we can see here that there was 3 irrigations there. There's probably 1, maybe 2 that we probably could have looked to drop. But if you're in the game of just trying to chase yields and your risks are low because of, like I said, timing of planting or the paddocks that you've got, okay, you can go for that. So the things that you need to look out for is that diurnal stepping, so that plant water use. So here you can see that diurnal stepping, so that's that day and night use of water. So as it drops down, that's your plant using water during the day, and that plateaus during the night. You can see these large steps, and this is and I'll just go back quickly. That's that period here when our climate is at its maximum ETO rate, and so we look at that and we use probiotics. That we're happy that our plants are really utilising that soil moisture. But as you can see, going later in the season, we can see those steps of us flattening out, and that's that gradient flattens out. So we can see here from the probe data that our plants are starting to shut down, they're starting to slow down. So that's a really good indication to say, right, we've got to slow down our irrigation as well. So that tapering off, as you can see. So that diurnal stepping isn't as pronounced, and our gradient is lower. So that's one key sign or reach to go, right, we've got to make sure that we start pulling back. So this is one where we haven't, I guess, let's just, a risk averse grower or someone who's maybe, let's just say it's the same grower, but that first paddock was his early season crop and this is his late season crop. So this is one that would be sitting around now. We're sitting around, that period here now. So we're going, okay, we're at a risk of, if we get a large rainfall event that's forecast in say 2 weeks time, this could be a problem. Okay, so we've dipped past that range in that tuber bulking, but we've still got most of our moisture being drawn up in that top 40 centimetres. But we can see here, as we've gone on to the season, we've got drawdown later in the season at depth, and that's the key. It's not, yes, we'll use the moisture in the topsoil part of the profile first, but drawing that moisture at depth, that's the key. So what we want to do is create a reservoir, empty our bucket. So then if we do get that rainfall event, we got somewhere to store it. It's not being stored within the top in the top 40 centimeters or the top 20, 30 centimeters where your tubers are. So if we go back, we can see here, we've never actually had a chance to draw down that subsoil moisture in that high yielding paddock. Right? We've never had a chance. Now, this is where you could get that massive rainfall event, and it doesn't sit here because that's already full. We haven't given it a chance to draw that moisture up. And this is similar, if you're talking about anything in grapes or anything, giving it that chance to draw some subsoil moisture, so those large rainfall events, you've got somewhere to put it. That's, so you're not sitting waterlogged, you don't stress the plants out. So it doesn't matter what the crop is, understanding how your soil behaves and where your moisture is being drawn up is critical. So if we got that large rainfall event, that'll be sitting here, and that's what's going to lead to your poor storability or disease or rot. So again, that's what we want to see. We're drawing down that subsoil moisture there, which is where we want that large rainfall event to go. And then we go to this next one, which is just purely been under irrigated. So we've missed the points here now, whether it's under irrigated because we're not enough water, or under irrigated because we haven't understood how our soil goes into the profile, or we haven't matched our soil type to the irrigation system we're using. Whatever it is, this is a paddock that has gone into water stress. Now, you would think straight away going, okay, well, if that means that I'm drawing moisture, if I haven't irrigated enough, would be drawing moisture down deeper earlier, which we have, but not very much. Like, that's pretty insignificant in terms of the drop off that we look at when a crop's at its peak evapotranspiration. Now, this is because when I say that one poorly timed irrigation, so in the case of that high risk, that high yielding paddock, it's a late irrigation that we didn't need that's going to cause the problem. In this situation, it's that early irrigation that we either didn't do, or we didn't get, or it didn't go in and keep our soil moisture at optimal condition for that root growth to give us root growth down here. Keeping your soil at optimal condition for root growth will give you deeper root architecture, which means you've got greater capacity to draw that moisture up later in the crop. So it's going in the later part of the season with a healthy root architecture, so you've got that mechanism to draw down. So this then has two double whammies. We've got low yield because there was poor irrigation in the middle part of the period to that tuber bulking, and realistically, we haven't really got that much of a reservoir where water can sit lower in the profile, because the plant just hasn't got the capacity to suck that moisture out, because we haven't kept it as healthy or given it a good root architecture through that good soil moisture. And so your poor yield, and then if we do get that rain, whatever we got there is going to be at risk of poor quality. So what I've done here, this is those three graphs that we looked at, and we have compared all three of them. And so blue is that high risk graph we saw first, risk averse. That second graph is the red, and the yellow is that poor irrigation, as you can see. Now, what I've done is I've split it into the top 40 sensors and the bottom 40 sensors. So what we can see here is we're ticking along beautifully. Most of our moisture uptake within the first two graphs is happening in the top 40. Fantastic, beautiful. That's what we want to do. As we can see here, the poorly irrigated has sucked it out early, but that hasn't had that much to draw upon later. But as we can see here, it's for yield, this is key, that top 40 centimeters. For risk to making sure we're not at risk of getting water pooling where our potatoes are, this bottom 40 centimeters is key. And we can see here that drop off in that risk averse graph. You can see that really nice drop off, and we can see here, like I mentioned earlier, we haven't got that nice drawdown as that bucket as we got. It's pretty much matched the same point. That risk averse and that under irrigators match the same point, but we haven't got the yield to go with it. So so you can see here, beautiful irrigation there, and so that's that top ones. We're monitoring that for moisture yield, for yields, and this one we're monitoring moisture for risk mitigation. So understanding that probe data, and again, this is before you start, come up with your questions. What is your plan? And the way, I don't care what data you're talking about when it comes to agriculture. I love data, but unless you've got a question to answer, unless you've got a reason to use it, it's just going to just confuse you or take up your time. If you can come up with a question to answer or a problem to solve early on, it's going to then drive how you display that data, but also drive what you make from that data. And this is a perfect example here. So these will be 3 different conversations I have with people going, yep, this is what we want to do. Great. This is what we're going to go for. This is what we want to try and achieve. And yeah, that was mentioned. So let's look at that practically when it comes to potatoes. So when we talk about matching ETA, that was that graph I spoke about. So this here, I'm just going to, as a bit of a case, this is, let's just say 100 days ago, this was planted. So this is now. So this is about now here at 100 days, this crop was planted. So we've got our ETA to work with. So if we look at it in practical terms, just like we need to ramp up irrigation based on the crop growing and our season getting from November, December, where our sunlight is, day length is increasing, our temperature is increasing. We need to increase our irrigation. We've got to ramp it off with the other end of the season. Okay. And you need to know what you've got in the profile. That's really important, and you got to understand that the day length and temperature decrease once we're over that. So if we look at that in practical terms, we can see here 12 millimeters. So 10 days after planting, our average weekly application to keep up, and this is not including rain, to keep up with crop water demand is 12 mils, 36 mils, 41 mils. And you can see here how we crest over. Understanding that is important. So continuing this irrigation, and that just means, well, I'm doing what I'm doing. Yep, it looks, the plants might look the same. They might have, be standing up, looking really healthy, but understanding how the crop physiology and that it's going back down, but also understanding that your day lengths and temperatures are decreasing. That kind of gives you a bit of an indication of what you should be doing, what your weekly average, what your weekly irrigation should be to keep up with that. And I like this graph to chuck it up there to give you a bit of an indication about, for me, being quite a visual person, how I understand things. So that's our evapotranspiration, our ETO, how it increases and decreases over the season. So we've got middle of winter here, either side, and that's your middle of summer. That's where we are now. So considering where we're irrigating here in the middle of January, December, we're looking at average ETOs around that 6, with a crop factor of 1. So like I said, if we've got a crop factor of 1.2, we want to put that up to about 7.5. Well, now we're sitting around that 4. So just giving you a bit of an indication, 4 times 7 is 14. So already there, that's 14 to 15 mils difference. We need to be pulling back to make sure that we're not putting too much moisture on and we're creating that buffer down there. So I always like this as, I look at it and just go, even me this morning taking this off our weather stations was a surprise to me. Seems pretty warm. It hasn't cooled down that much when you walk outside compared to where we were here. But looking at the data empirically rather than just off your feel can really help you make those decisions. So just a couple more things to consider when we're talking about that end of season irrigation. So remember, it's a combination of that crop maturing and ETO decreasing. So yes, the crop might look the same as it was when it was at peak ETO, but maturing, it means it's slowing down, its physiology is slowing down its water use, and that ETO decreasing, what we saw in that previous graph, it's a combination of the two. All right, so making sure that you're well aware of that. Watch your probes, like the data I've just shown you, but do multiple digs as well. Right? Making sure you go with your shovel and do digs. And when you do digs, you talk about healthy zones and patchy areas. All right, you want to try and strike that balance. Again, we're not too fussed about trying to. If it was middle of the season, I wouldn't worry about the patchy areas. I'm trying to irrigate to the healthy areas because you don't want to pull back the best performing parts of your paddock or your best performing crops. But now we're at the stage where risk mitigation is important, and those patchy areas are important because they're not using up as much water because they don't have a plant there to draw the moisture, as much plant biomass to draw the moisture out. So trying to strike that balance, because those wet areas will then be the spots that get that root disease. Okay, so don't go to your best performing parts, but I encourage you to look at in peak season. This is where you got to go, okay, now I'm into risk mitigation mode. I've got to make sure that I'm assessing those poorly parts of the paddock, because you might have a few patches that have that disease and that can throw everything right out in terms of storability for your whole paddock. So that's really important. So yeah, keeping an eye out for those diseases like powdery scab and blacklead. And when you irrigate, I don't care what it is, potatoes, pasture, anything that comes off that slows down its water, you just don't go cold turkey, okay? And in particularly for potatoes, we need to maintain soil moisture for two main reasons. One is we don't want that moisture to crack, the soils to crack, because then you get that's an entry point for tuber moths to go down for the grubs. And and we want to make sure we got some nice soil moisture there, so your soil's soft for harvesting, so you don't get bruising. You don't want to get cloddy bits of dirt that go, especially in your red soils, it can go quite hard when they're dry. That's a recipe for bruising, even if your crop's the nest. All right, so make sure you do that. So a little bit. So that's where you want to irrigate little and often. So if you might have had, say, be putting on a hard hose that you'd be putting on 30 to 35, that's not going to work in terms of what we want to try and do there. It's just trying to put a little bit on just to maintain good moisture in the top 10 to 20 centimetres. Okay, we don't want to go putting on 30 mils and then filling up that bucket, filling up that reservoir that we've just created, and then getting caught out because we get a follow-up rain. So understanding what you're doing it for is critical. Okay, and then if you do have issues, harvest the wet areas first or as soon as possible. Right? Make sure you get them out. So if you do get a weather event that comes and sneaks up and you're not stuck. So that's a bit of a like I said, if you're not, you might not be growing potatoes, but these processes that we go through using probe data or anything like that, the thinking is behind it's the same. All right, come up with your plan. What are you trying to achieve? Think past that, the award-winning wine, think past that 80-ton potato crop, think past that, that 15-ton wheat crop that you want to blow out of the park this year, and think, okay, what is it? At the end of the day, it's the check, all right? And so what are the things that we need to do in place to make sure, so if it means you might just get a bit of a reduction in yield, so be it, all right? But making sure that at the end of the season, you've got something that you've struck that balance. So now we're going to our seasonal snapshot, and similar to last month, it's not as interesting as, it's a bit boring. This is that period where we're just kind of holding pattern. So if we go up to the northwest, we can see here similar. This is where we were last month. We're pretty similar. We've got a few rainfall events to come through, but right now those rainfall events are kept things stable. Okay, so what it's just doing is just keeping up with plant water demand. So it's what plants we're using now. If you go into our heavier soils, again, it's just kind of, these are rainfalls that we didn't get same time last couple of years, and it's just kind of kept things status quo. So which is a good thing, because what it's then doing is that autumn break that we're hoping for, we're not getting an autumn break when your soils are dry. If your soils are dry and you've got an autumn break, which can be thunderstorms at this time of year and it's high intensity, you might not capture that rainfall as efficiently as you might, because it's, that application rate is too high. So these rainfall events, they're keeping things, level in terms of soil moisture for plant availability, but what they are also doing is keeping your soil surface at a nice capacity to take in that large rainfall event that you'll hopefully get as part of your autumn break. And if we go a bit further south down around that yellow Wynyard area, you can see we got a bit more of that rainfall pattern that came through about a week ago, and we can see we've topped up that fraction. And then if we go to sassafras again, we've got that same amount of rainfall, but you can see that's topped up that 20-30 centimetres a little bit. And again, understanding that we've gone when we're at our driest period now, our soil top 10 doesn't get to fill capacity and then drain to 20 and 30. You can see here, that's our field capacity for 10. That's our field capacity. That's where we've got to for our 10 now. Your soils need to go through a few cycles of rainfall pattern of rainfall events to wet themselves back up, as we can see here. Every rainfall from last year, we slowly got up. We need to give our soils a chance from going to our driest period that they can be. So for our driest period to our full point, we want to make sure that those micropores and those macropores get the chance to wet those soils up. If we go to the northeast, similar there, we've got that rainfall event that came through there. It's filled up, so we can see here this soil is a bit more vertic, so has more movement, so it has a bit more of a propensity to crack to crack and shrink. And so as we can see here, we've got a similar response to, say, sassafras at the top 10 centimeters. But we can see here, if we looked at the stat graph, it's behaved completely differently. That sassafras probe on a red ferrocell, that filled from the top down. Fantastic. That's how we were taught in our, when we were at our Soils 101 classes back in high school that I wish they taught. We can see here that, that's how it behaves, and that's how we think about it. We can see here in this soil here, it's just kind of found its way through preferential flow, and it's filled, it's working its way down. So we can see that that's how it filled up last winter, and it's doing the same thing again. So understanding how your soils behave is really important. If you go to Ringarooma, we can see here again that we've got that rainfall event, but we're sitting similar to where we're just above where we were same time last year. And then our sandy soils up around that Tomahawk region got a nice bit of rain, and it's topped things up on that top 10-20 centimeters, but pretty similar to where we were same time last year. So I've kind of combined the summary for the north and west, north and east, west and east, northwest and east, northeast coast. So yeah, soil moisture is the same time, the similar point as last year, nothing special there. So any established crops or pastures, so any dairies, start to think about slowing that irrigation down. So if you're any irrigation on dairy pastures, look to go down to that 25 to 30 mils a week, where last month we're talking about that 40 to 45. We've come off that 15 mils a week. And then the next webinar will be around how we transition that autumn irrigation to try and capture that winter. So yes, you go, why would I want to keep up with plant demand with irrigation when I've got winter coming? You can have your cake and eat it too, but in that 25 to 30 mils, make sure we account for rain as well. And yeah, as I've been banging on about in the first half, early potatoes, start thinking about creating that buffer zone before your plants start to really shut down. And if we then go to the Northern Midlands, if you have a look at Parkham, that's missed that one there. We can see we've got that rainfall event, and we're sitting just above where we were same time last year, pretty similar. If we go to Meander, we can see we've had a bit of rain, but again, we're sitting pretty similar. Really interesting, 3 different patterns in that part of the Tasmania over the last 3 years. So the more data we're collecting there, we're starting to understand more trigger points as well, for how this region's behaving. Hagley, we've had some nice little rainfall events that are topping things up again. It's on a red ferrocell. You can see it's filling from the top down. Okay, so you can see those rainfalls. So if we do get a thunderstorm, we should have some nice infiltration and maximise that rainfall that we get. In Bishopsburn, we did get that rain, but it's a different soil type. So it's a soil that's a bit more of a loamier soil, and so it didn't respond as well, that infiltration, because it's quite a dry. It's its driest point that it's ever been. So yeah, that rain wasn't as effective there either. And then if we go to just the other side of Longford, we can see here that it's just flatlined, and that hasn't really it's on a slope. It's dried right out early in the season, so we're really looking to get some repeat rainfall events to wet this one up. So this is kind of what we're starting to see in that northern Midlands. So if we go to the Northern Midlands summary, pretty similar, same time last year. This is just where we're at. This is the season we're looking at in terms of how we're sitting. We're just waiting for that rainfall event to come along. Again, irrigated crops slowing down to that 25 to 30 mils a week, count for rain. This applies to anyone around the coast as well. Any new sowings, when we come to irrigation, little and often's the key, all right? We don't want to then put a large amount on, get that rainfall, and then because you've got very small root zone, you're going to be in a period of waterlogging, and that can be a disaster, okay? And on the flip side, just one to throw in, have you thought about drainage? If you're either looking to sow and you can run a spinner drain through it, or you have sown and you've still got the capacity to be able to do that. No one thinks about drainage now when it's dry and there's no water lying around, but it's Tasmania, and we're going to get that period where it's going to be wet. So try and set your crop up now that you planted any carrot seed crops or anything like that you're planting now. or new pastures. Set them up as well as you can for those wetter periods of the year. All right, so that's one to think about. Getting a really good elevation map for your paddock, having that assessed and put drains in the right position can make the difference between coming out of winter and spring sooner from that waterlogging phase. So that's one to think about. The saying is water on, water off. If you're going to put water, if you're putting water on through irrigation, you're going to have to get water off at some time of the year. So yeah, we don't think about it now because we're pretty bone dry, but it's something to make sure you think about. Southern Midlands. If we go here on the sandier sites, those windblown sands around that Campbelltown area, you can see we've pretty much reached one of the driest spots at driest points we've been on this probe. These soils very, very prone to hydrophobicity. When they're sitting this dry, it takes a nice slow irrigation, a slow rainfall to make sure that we get somewhere. And that rain pattern that came through was quite heavy. It was quite localised and it could be quite heavy in patches. Not ideal when it comes to infiltration. St. Peter's Pass, a bit further south, not as much rain, but we can see a similar point same time last year. Stonehouse, a bit further east coast, we're pretty much bang on exactly where we were same time last year. Cull Valley, the story is pretty similar. Huon Valley, if you look at our sandy soils, it's pretty much last 3 years. This is where we're at. This is that point of the soil moisture where we reach, where it's been exhausted, and now that's where we're hoping and fingers crossed for an autumn break to make sure that we start that. Same with Weatheron, which is on your heavier soil, and as we go towards ooze, it's pretty repetitive. So when we talk, looking at that summary for the Southern Midlands, Derwent Valley, Cull Valley, Hobart area, again, it's a similar soil moisture the same time last year. Pretty much, walk around that 25 to 30 mils of irrigation. We're starting to slow down, and again, that especially for that Bothwell area and those new sowings, little and often. Let's make sure that we're not putting too much on. We're just keeping that root zone, that top 20, 30 centimetres of that root zone right, and hopefully we'll get nice water break in winter. East coast of Fingal Valley. Now, last month, it was pretty much everything just culminated at the same point, and we're still there pretty much, except for what I want to pull out of this one is 4 years ago. So you can see we're all at the same point, but this is the kind of rainfall that we want to see. So we can see at the very end of February 4 years ago, we got that rainfall, and that's what we're waiting for. We're just kind of on that precipice until we get it or we don't get it, which can be quite frustrating. So that there is this rainfall there, and you can see the impact that it's had. So that's what we're kind of hanging out for, and you can see how it was spread over those. We had a little bit at the start, but then we've had spread out over those 3 days, which is exactly what we want. We don't want it all dumping on at once, just to fill the profile up. So this here was a beautiful bit of rain just to get things, just a bit wet. The first one had nice infiltration. We can see we got that good follow up. So that's what we're seeing there. So essentially, this is what we're hoping and will come in the next month or so. If we go further west to Kilimu, we can see the impact of that rainfall there as well 4 years ago. And Speyside, as we go further west, that weather system was a bit decreased, but again, you can see how it had impact. So in summary for the East Coast and the Fingal Valley, soil moisture similar time, same time as last year. Start to tailback irrigation on pastures, and this goes for anyone who's looking to decrease your irrigation on those, not so much potatoes, where you want to be more strategic about what you put on and how much you put on to make sure where it goes in the profile. But if you're irrigating pastures, the best thing to do, the easiest thing to do is just increase your spacing. Okay, increase your spacing, and then we'll get to a point, in a month where you want to increase your spacing to a certain amount and then decrease your amount that you put on. So yeah, the easiest way to go when you want to slow down is just, if you're doing it every 3 days or 2 days, space that out to, from 2 days to 3 days or 3 days to 4 days, and then week by week, just increase that out. And that'll feather out nicely. Flinders Island. If we look down to the northern middle part of the island, we can see here very similar point. We've got some rainfall there, which has had a nice impact on the top 10-20 centimetres. At Nampara, if we further north, we've got a bit more rain that skirted through the northern part of that part of the island, so we can see how that just the difference in rainfall across the island there has made a difference, which has been nice to see. If we didn't get that rain like the last 2 years, we would have matched that nicely, but we can see we've got a change in the season already compared to the last 2 years, which will then drive a bit of that pasture continuing on through autumn. As we can see, it's being utilised by the pasture, which is the best kind of rain this time of year we want to see. If it becomes too late, then everything shuts down. If you go then to King Island, Egg Lagoon, on the semi-coastal country, we can see here we've got a little bit of rain, but we're pretty similar to where we were the same time last year. And then on Pagara alone, we can see we've got a bit more rain that came through that southern part, the middle part of the island, but we're pretty similar to where we were same time last year. Now, this is one thing I wanted to show for King. Now, I talk about that soil moisture similar. It's creeping in compared to the same last year. And it's something I've mentioned the last, I think, 3 or 4 webinars is on King Island, we need rainfall to exceed summer rainfall and autumn averages. Summer and autumn averages to start getting back to normal. And when I mean normal, I've pulled this data off back in 2021. This is essentially pretty good season where your rainfall matched your long-term averages, and you've got a nice, beautiful January there. We can see here that that's that wetter winter that you come into, but that's something that you expect thinking on that wet winter. All right, so but when we look at 2024, which we all remember that year, how we had that really poor irrigation, really poor rainfall in that first 4 months of the year, or first 5 months of the year, which really, and even June, which really put us on the back foot that year. And then even last year, we had some good rainfall at the back end of 2024 that helped. But then we had that dry period there. So we weren't still in our normal winter phase. So we've had essentially two seasons where we haven't got back to that. So and then we had that spring, which is that we had a Goldilocks winter for King Island. So we had growth that was happening here, and that just matched beautifully when it came to our pasture demand. So we never sat in a state of waterlog. Now that's not, in inverted commas, normal for King Island. We are usually in a state of waterlog throughout the winter. So when I say normal, or what we're used to, that's what we geared up to in terms of cattle and stocking rates, in terms of grazing, what we're doing, and those kind of things. So that's what you want to get you make sure that you're in tune with that. So for me, looking forward, I want to get us back to that, but more to equate for that differences that we haven't had there. So at the moment, January, we pretty much had nothing. So when I'm looking at that exceeding summer and winter, summer and autumn averages, February, let's just say we got the same. January, we were behind already. March, yes, we're a week in. I know only a week in, but in terms of what we're getting there as well. So what I want to see is not this again, is going back to that. So that's just one thing to keep an eye out in terms of how the next spring is going to kick off for King Island. And look, fingers crossed, we just get a wet April, March, May, July, June, July, and we get those water pooling in the paddocks where you shouldn't be able to stand in the middle of August. Hopefully that comes back in to just get that reset. So anyway, that's one thing just to think about, just to give people an explanation when I'd say that we want to see rainfall exceeding to get back to that normal. So key takeaways for this month. Again, same as last month. Now is our normal holding period still. So rain now our rain is contributing to our autumn break, and I put a question mark there because our autumn break, and it's something we pull off the Google, what's our autumn break, what's the definition? And the official definition is 25 mils or more in a day, or 30 mils over about 7 days by Anzac Day. That's the definition. Now, we talk about autumn breaks in Victoria and a lot of the dryland wheat country in southern New South Wales. There's a big difference, I think, in terms of what an autumn break means for those guys and what it means for us. And understanding this all is key. So how is your rain contributing to your autumn break? That's something I'm going to cover in the next webinar. So that's why it's really important to know your soil type. And I've put some homework on you a couple of webinars ago, and I'm going to do it again to actually figure out, go look at your soils now. Have you got parts of your paddock that are cracking? Have you got parts of your farm that aren't? Those kind of, get a bit of an idea of where your soil, dig some holes around the place. Dig it, put it in a few different buckets or bags, take it back, sit it on the table, lay it out and have a look, all right? And then if we do get a significant rain, go for a dig the next day. All right, have a look where the water went. If you have a look at the soils that are cracked now, and let's just say, you get an inch of rain, you get your 20, 25 mils, which constitute an autumn break. Are your cracks still there? How deep do your cracks go? Where's the water going? Because if you've got a soil that has cracks down to 80, 90 centimeters, which is quite common in a lot of our clay soils around Tasmania, that's not an autumn break. That's not available to your pasture in autumn. That's the start of your winter refill. That's your soils filling from the top or from the bottom up, and we'll go into that next one. So, bit of homework. Go have a look at your soils now, do some comparisons, see how they behave, take notes, take photos. That's the one thing I love about photos on your phone now, they're geotagged. So you can take your photo and you can go back and you can zoom back in, see what photos you took, and do that comparison, that timestamp. And then if you do get a rain, go out and have a bit of a look the next day. But the last one is just keep an eye on your probe or ETO rates to scale back irrigation. Don't go cold turkey, okay? Make sure that that you understand what your plan is and not just go, okay, right, I'm going to shut up shop and wait for winter to come or wait for my autumn break. Make sure you be strategic about how you do it. And that's it for this month. Again, just the probe data.
Sorry, Marek, can I just jump in there? Can you just explain what you mean by the term Goldilocks winter?
Like Goldilocks winter. So it's not too wet, not too dry. So this year for us, we did usually coming into September, October, we will have, wet parts of the paddock and we'll be sitting quite wet. So we're waiting for those plants pastures to ramp up and waiting for ETOs to increase to start drawing that soil moisture up. And then, whereas this year we were getting growth in August because we didn't have a wet May, June. So we had growth in August. So two things it does, your plants aren't in a state of waterlogged, so they kick off sooner. And it was a mild August as well. And so what happened is higher evapotranspiration, so growth increased. Growth was kicking off. So it wasn't too wet, it wasn't too dry like a couple of winters back. So that perfect for growth. Now, while we're all jumping around for joy and going, you beauty, it's a fantastic August and September, we're getting really good growth. There's no such thing as a free lunch. It's going to come back somewhere unless Mother Nature decides that she's just going to be really nice about when she drops her rainfall. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's a term that I've created and coined, but I mean the Goldilocks zone. Earth is in our Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot, not too cold, right distance from the sun. Goldilocks winter makes sense to me in that term as well. So yeah. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and look forward to speaking to you next month. Cheers.